Well, the current term is done and dusted. As a country, we are waiting for a new term, a new administration to the Republic of Uganda. As we are approaching that, we are also looking at Uganda approaching nearly 40 years under the Uganda system, which is a multi-partisan system. And the current party that is in power, transitioning from one term to another, is the National Resistance Movement that has been in power for now officially 40 years, where they get to see a period being marked by political stability, infrastructure growth, but also rising public debt, persistent corruption allegations, youth unemployment, among other key issues, all tying into governance and accountability, as well as transparency. Now, beyond the party's slogans and political rhetoric, we are wanting to examine the real state of our nation and the future of Uganda after 4 decades of the NRM rule. Talking to us about this in depth, being joined to the extreme left. Of course, now we have to follow protocol, party protocol. You do have Paula Awich, who's joining us, Director of Foreign Affairs and under the NRM. Good morning to you. How are you?
I'm fine. But tired.
But tired.
Because I've been in Entebbe airport the whole night welcoming our visiting Secretary Generals. There are many. Okay. The last 2 I picked was from Algeria and also picked Zimbabwe. And
the others are from where?
Others from Turkmenistan, Malawi, Burundi, South Sudan, and more are still coming.
Okay. We're also joined by Mr. Philip Kakuru, NRM member, to be part of this conversation. Good morning to you.
Good morning, ma'am.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you, ma'am.
I know that you're also part and parcel of the preparations for the transition of power. What's that looking like from your abilities?
All systems are in place. People are ready. The venue in Corolla yesterday, all is at its best. Security is at its highest. The delegates have confirmed. Like you saw in the media, 35 heads of states expected. I think Ugandans who voted for us, the 71%, I think those must come very early tomorrow. Otherwise, we are expecting more than 50,000 people. So they want to show the support that we showed you on the ballot paper. This Kampala will all be yellow.
Okay.
Come tomorrow.
Right. Joining us also is Jacqueline Nakaiza, political analyst, to help us, through your lenses. Jacqueline, good morning to you. What is this transition looking like for you?
Good morning, everyone. The transition, right now we can't really tell, but we are hopeful to see a transition after 40 years of the NRM government in power. Indeed, there must be a transition. However, my colleagues here are probably could tell us more about the gatekeeping, who the political elites are going to be in part of the transition process, because definitely it has to be there. We really must have a change. In 1986, the NRM government, or the current president, could visualize what Uganda would be like. But right now, I'm not very sure whether he can really visualize Uganda for the next 50 or 100 years. So there must be a transition, and for people to begin planning for what our country will be going ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking of visualization, Major Paula, this is where I want to come in with you. Tomorrow is the D-Day, President-elect being sworn in for yet another term, his 7th term, but more broadly entering into his era of nearly 5 decades as a leader. What message is this inauguration particularly, but also in reflection of his journey from 1986 actually sent to Ugandans, especially around continuity and the future direction of our country?
Well, already we have had 2 themes which is going on. We have the theme of the campaign, which we ran throughout, protecting the gains, and also the theme of the inauguration rotates around the same thing. So if you unpackage that theme, both the one we used in campaign and even the swearing in itself, it speaks to the message that you're asking about. The many things, if you unpackage the gains that it is, that can speak. For example, one gain that we don't want it reversed is the stability of the country. Maybe our viewers will not know that between 1962 to 1985, that's a period of 24 years, we had 9 governments. That is an average of 3 years per government. But there are other governments which will only last for 6 to 8 days. And there was a government which was even shared, not only lasting for a short time, but one government with 3 heads of states, 3 presidents at a go. That can show you the confusion. That's a government where you had President Nyamuchoncho, President Musoke, President Wachaulwol, like the Trinity we talk about in the Bible. That speaks about the instability that engulfed the 24 years. But all that circus was cleared by NRM, by Museveni. And we always say that it is cleared as long as this stability is on a routine electoral procedures of 5 years. That is it. So the message are there, and of course you have other measurements which wouldn't want it to transition. For example, development of state institutions like the military, like the strong judiciary, like police, like the IGG, these anti-corruption institutions. So there are very many institutions which have been built, which are part of the gains that must be secured, and that's a message which comes out after the 40 years. Of course, it's a transition even in the livelihood. Remember that when NRM came, the life expectancy was 43 years, now it is 64. Now, as if people are now living 64 years compared to 43, that must be protected, not reverse, that we again lapse back to a life expectancy of 43. And the national unity, if you watch like government delegations which go outside Uganda, it's amazing. Some people think that we speak English because Ugandans love it. It's just because the government delegation, Okello can't talk with Mugisha, and Mugisha can't talk to Kurut and what. But outside, I've seen the delegations, they say we love English. No, in Europe, Yugoslavia had a country. They broke until they became like tribes. At one time, Serbia and Montenegro remained as a country. They went to World Cup to play World Cup. When they went second half, they broke into 2. Now we're asking them, if you win this World Cup, where will you take it? But the fact that Uganda, under the constitution, the 3rd schedule called indigenous community, which lists Acholi and Baganda, blah, 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 we have remained as one. And it doesn't appear to anybody now like we don't care which tribe you come from. We are one. Even if you are in Kabale, and you ring your phone and you are talking to a Karamojong, you are Karamojong and you are talking, who cares? Who walks around you to say you are a stranger? So the country is united, we acknowledge our diversity. So those are the messages that can come in the 40 years, okay, including the culture of statehood, the culture that we are Ugandans. That is it. So a lot has been done, and you may not explain it within a short time, but all these are pieces or ingredients that will speak for the 40 years, and nobody will want that reverse. Who would want a situation where a Karamojong goes to Kavala and cannot even ring a phone and talk in a Karamojong? Who cares now if you went to Mnyankole goes to Moroto and is talking to his people? So those are the gains that has been achieved, and it will have to be protected. Okay.
Jacqueline, if from your lenses, you've been part and parcel over the 40 years, and this is history unfolding or refolding. We want to understand from you, who's a scholar of governance, what have been the hits when it comes to the 40-year reign that you have seen?
Well, of course we have to talk about the stability. However, the trend is worrying, because when you look at other places where we've had people overstaying in power, when the president exits, then there is some form of chaos, which we have no guarantee that we may not have happen in Uganda. I'll give a simple example of our neighbors here in Sudan. When Bashir left, you see what is happening, and right now we are hosting a very, very big number of Sudanese in Uganda. So our worry is, and where we don't have a guarantee right now, is what will happen when the president exits, because at a certain point he's going to exit. And we as scholars, maybe we can argue for the Kenya kind of situation where we had a peaceful negotiation of a transition between Moi's government and which allowed President Kibaki to come in. And that was just simply after 24 years. And we see that after that, Kenya had that semblance of stability, or it had that stability, much as they could have some bit of internal tensions, but it's not as bad. However, in other places where the presidents are forced out, definitely it would have to be forced. And the gains, the most important gain that the NRM talks about is the stability, the security, but really, what assurance do you give the country that you're going to protect that if there is no peaceful transfer of power? So that is the key thing. Okay,
all right. Kakuru here is one that is definitely representing the core of the party, and that's where people have worked with the party. Continuity guaranteeing stability that she is questioning, and the steady development that has been acquired over the 40 years. What should Ugandans, perceive of it, but at the same time also, can they still continue trusting the party?
You see, Priscilla, first of all, to the viewers, thank you for voting President Museveni overwhelmingly with the 71%. And that is a testament of confidence in our party and our governance. Secondly, when we talk about protecting the gains, they are not confined to only the security aspect that she's talking about, Doctor, here. We are talking about my colleague Major Paula talked about security. We are not looking at trade. We are not, the critical point that we needed to address when the government came to power was the political question. How do you build a country? And how did NRM achieve this with the visionary leadership of Museveni? Number one, there are two things that has made NRM reach where it is. One, as a master tactician of politics, was the principle of co-opting. The second one was understanding the principle of sustainability. What do we mean by co-opting? One, when he came to power, as Paula has mentioned, he said, where is DP of Kawanga Semogerere? They were co-opted. Where is Western Nile Bank front of Moses Ali? They were co-opted. Where is Freedom of Kaira? They were co-opted. Where is the Omara Tubos of UPC? Everybody was co-opted. What was he trying to achieve here? Was building a national cohesive society, which we had lacked previously. Because when you look at the simple co-opting principle that had worked of KYUPC was not that thorough and successful. And how do you create, just like other revolutionaries, he had learned over time that to create sustainability, you must allow transition. I heard her talking about transition. We have had 7 generations of transition within the NRM. When you look at the crop of the Chisekas, the Abu Mayanjas, the Mayanja Kanjis, you come, you look at the Chintumusokes, and you look at the Sendawaras. You move on, you look at the decision of the Mutagambas. You look at the transition that brought in the 2005 cadres that have lived on to bring it to the 2011. That the current crop of leadership that you see right now in NRM, majority came actually after the 2010s. Now, what does that tell you? That we've been transitioning, and in building a revolution, like you talk about Communist Party in China, you mention that, you hear Mao Zedong. You talk about CCM, you hear about Nyerere. You talk about the ANC, you hear about Mandela. The same way the President Museveni we have is actually the Moses of Uganda. He came to liberate the country, and he came with that clear vision. So the transitioning that we've talked about that has brought us from the political cohesion that we've achieved, the social cohesion, we are now looking at transforming society using trade, economics, because we talked about building an integrative free markets, we are talking about beneficiation, we are talking about value addition, we are talking about services like tourism, because the centerpiece of all this that was causing this is called economy. If the economy is not stable, you cannot have a stable society. Now, if we've built the economy, we are talking about tenfold now. We found the economy in shambles. We are now talking about 60 billion. There is no Ugandan you're going to take back who has enjoyed the successful PDM, the successful, look at the skyscrapers. Nobody you're going to tell to do what? To take us back. So when she's scared of the Sudan situation, it cannot happen in the Ugandan situation. Besides, transition has been taking place in the military, in civil society. That's why you can find the young people. Look at the young people in cabinet. These, some of us who were 5 years old when Museveni came. Now we are here positioning ourselves where we are in government, serving. So what does that tell you? That society has evolved. The revolution has evolved. Okay. Steadfastly.
Speaking of evolution, there's also another element of evolution that we must put into consideration, and that's the evolution of the population. From a senior population to now a younger demography. Many of them have been under the 1986, so they were not part of the wars. They've had the stories but cannot really relate. What then defines the achievement of the NRM beyond stability in perspective of that demography of, generations? Paula.
First of all, I want to also comment about the issue of the worry of a long stay of a leader and thereafter. Of course, I had in that school of thought, people have cited many examples. The Yugoslavia itself, after Tito, has been cited. I think Said Barre in Somalia has been cited. Gaddafi has been cited, and many others. Their argument is that when a leader stays for long, when he goes, there's automatic chaos. I don't think that should be a worry here, because we have been seeing and studying and learning. In fact, some people crudely had even put in some sectors that you wait tomorrow when another party wins, we shall kill you or we shall chase you. That can't happen, because right now, even a president who is elected will have to use the military, even for mere parade. Because if somebody thinks by Museveni going, you bring in security, you are actually now telling the military that the coming government will cause insecurity. In such circumstances, you are even warranting a military coup. I think it would be in the best interest of any other coming government to assure people that, please, don't. We are democratic, don't do anything. Because immediately you start to think like that, for example, let's say, who was this guy in the other election, the young man who used to say, Katumba. Assuming now Katumba Oye was elected, and then you wake up that following morning when Katumba Oye is elected, and you said, you NRM, we are going to cut you with panga. That already you're showing to the state institutions like the military that at least let military take over, because to avoid this arbitrariness and confusion. Therefore, the institutional framework is that this government has studied those other incidences, those examples being cited, and that is why the institutions, especially institution of states and the judiciary, is so built that it stands the resistance of such worries which has been cited. Mm-hmm. Now, your question is about the population. Surely, it is true that right now, those 40 years now, who were born when NRM came, I'm lucky I was part of those who came, but some even recklessly say, we don't know the past, don't tell us about the history. But we all know that you can't. History is studied and you compare with the present so that you determine the future. So whoever thinks, don't tell me about history, is a lie. Because we are now talking of that generation, I think you call Gen Z, Generation Z. Those are people born between 1997 and 2012. It is described in that generation diction that their parents were Generation X. Generation X produces Gen Z. Now, this population, NRM as a party is alive to it. We are alive to it because we target them in law and in practice. For example, in law, we know that under budgetary processes, there must be a particular percent for the youth. Similarly, for the women. These are institutionalized in law. 2, proactive programs should be made deliberately, either also through education, vocational institutions to cater for them, but also involvement into economic productive activities like a youth fund. There's several youth funds that connect it. So once you put this money into the resources of this youth, then you cater for them. Including education, UPE, you know it is there, and UPE. These educated youth absorbed into economic ventures are less dangerous than you say. Somebody was making a joke in the village that you better make your son be educated. When he's beating you, at least he beats you with respect. So I don't know that the son who is completely illiterate, when he's beating a father, doesn't care whether he beats the head or what. So in a sense, but the point here is an informed person, an educated person, drawn and put into economic ventures, like I'm saying, can be channeled through a useful process. We have even targeted the ghettos. Ghettos, we realize as a party that much as UPE and USE, that is Universal Secondary Education, was going on, you educate so many youth that should you not plan for them, then you are in effect generating a problem for yourself. But that one, we are alive to it, and it is presented. So the population now, we are alive to it, and so many interventions are in place. That shouldn't worry anybody.
All right, thank you so much, which we're also being joined by a political analyst who will bring an East Africa as well as a Pan-African perspective to the table as we look into the transition of government here in Uganda. Do stay with us. Accountability from one term to a new term as we look to the administration of the next 5 years, preparing to swear in, starting tomorrow with the highest office in the land, the President of the Republic of Uganda. Then it will trickle down to Parliament and the other different stakeholders that will then form the new government that will lead us for the next 5 years. Joining us on this panel is Ndugu Mande Akol, who's bringing into perspective the East African and also Pan-African voice on the matter of transition as he has been able to see it and interact with it, especially within East Africa. There's always a rotation, and most recent rotation was from Tanzania. Now it's Uganda's turn, and next year it will be Kenya's turn. And from your perspective, what are these transition cycles telling us as the East African story?
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be on this show this morning. Yeah, when we talk about transition in the region, yes, when you look at Kenya, they've always had transitions, especially the top office. You find somebody comes for 10 years and then hands over. The same thing has been with Tanzania. Yeah, but for the case of Rwanda and Uganda, we should also say that we've had, I can call them minor transitions. Minor transitions in a sense that if you've been closely watching President Yoweri Museveni's way of doing things, every after 10 years, he brings on altogether new players. And you find that these new players re-energize the revolution and push it to a particular level. The same thing has been happening with Kagame, that is in Rwanda. So these are, we've also had our own internal, because ideally you can see that there has been peaceful changes within other ranks of government. We find Chief Justice comes, then we have another one like that, the speakership, the Prime Minister, the Vice President. So we've had all these, even at military level, you see one military chief coming in, another one peacefully, which used not to be the case in the past. Therefore, our elections are organized in a way that last year it was Tanzania, this year Uganda, next year it's going to be Kenya. So we keep learning from one another. I don't know whether we learn good practices or bad practices, but we keep learning from one another. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That being said, YouFund is having a discussion on where does this leave the facilitators that are now and the future of this transitions conversation that has been ongoing here on the table, to which Major Paula, which I was making a reference to how, as a government, they've been able, through policy and regulations and institutional mandates, been able to capture the heart, especially of the young person post 1986 era, to which I want to turn to the senior presidential advisor. The very same demographic that we've been talking about, who should be considered part and parcel of the transition. We had conversations earlier with them, and we were asking the pertinent question of where are they in the decision making, because yes, you've made room enough for them to participate in the decision making, but now at the tables of decision making, where do we see the young people when they continue to cry unemployment, they continue to cry being left out of positions because some seniors are still holding on to the courts in the offices, among other issues that all tie into the economics of the day, which you are, passionate about.
Thank you, Priscilla. And Comrade Akol has put it well, that the East African region is very well, we learn from each other and we've been stable. Actually, when you look at Africa, the East African region has been the most stable compared to the Central Africa and West Africa, if you look at the current coups. And this tells you, brings you to the question, what has created that stability in East African region compared to West Africa or Central Africa? And the clear, steadfast leadership of President Yoweri Museveni has been central to the stability in the East African region. We all agree on that. Now, the demographic dispensation that you're talking about of the young generation, 85% of the people in Uganda being more youth. What has government had? Government from the onset, 1986, had priority areas. And I can tell you, as we move to the middle income, they have looked at youth initiatives. Look at how much money has gone to youth livelihood projects. Billions of money, if you look at the budget. When we look at skilling of the youth, that is towards bringing them into the technical expertise to enable them and capacitate them in terms of human capital development to be able to be enablers of the processes that we are looking at. When we look at the youth in terms of entrepreneurship, when you look at PDM, some of the AM were young people that they're trying to say, it's not all about you going to Kampala and ride the border. You can empower yourself right on the farms, back in poultry, in farming, in all these sectors. When you look at recruitment, for example, in the military, when you look at the people that we had in the military, the Ivan collectors of 1978, you look at the jet muevas in the 80s, you look at the crop, you can see that the military is retiring most of the officials that were there in the 80s. So transitioning to try to enable the young people to take over. For instance, who knew the 1978 crop are seeing the young general whom they gave birth to in Tanzania. He's the CDF, like you've mentioned. That shows you that the youth are getting on board. When you look at our cabinet and parliament, the majority, we have the youngest parliament, I think, in the whole of Africa. Now, what does that tell you? We are positioning our youth into the fold of leadership. Like I've said, that some of us were just 5 years old when President Museveni came and many others. So it tells you that we are being positioned, or the government is preparing, as we've said, evolving. The revolution is evolving from one leadership. Look at the speaker that we have, 49. Look at the deputy speaker, 43. Look at the young ministers, the Ogwangs. Look at the Barams. Look at the Liliana Bells. That tells you that the revolution is what? Evolving and steadfastly bring them. So in terms of the economy and education, look at the education system. The education system we had in the 80s when we came was more theoretical. Are you seeing the revised education system? When you look at the education system that was there during the time of the Amanya Mushegas, when you do even rehearse and cram, who's the Minister of Education? Amanya Mushega. Who's the Minister of Finance? Mayanja Nkanji. You see, those were the days, but now We don't need to cram that. The youth are being purposed to study technology, because you cannot say the drivers, what we are looking at are turning around the economy. It's manufacturing, it's agriculture, value addition and processing, it's services, which is tourism, IT, technology, and export-oriented. The markets are there. The East African region, as we look at, for example, the global politics, you can see that everybody is America first, Europe first, everybody is looking inward-looking. What is our government doing? We are looking at East Africa regional integration, Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement. Whose opportunities are we creating? Uganda, we are blessed in terms of our strategic location. South Sudan, we are the feeders. You look at the 120 million people in DRC, the bigger part of the eastern DRC, we are doing infrastructure network there to get these people back into the business. Who's the beneficiary? Uganda, if you have an airport flying from Kinshasa to Entebbe, Entebbe connecting to London, Entebbe connecting to Dubai, Entebbe connecting to Nigeria, we are creating markets in Algeria. You look at our strategic location of Burundi, survives, flies direct to Uganda. The next thing, so we are a connecting hub, and this revival of the East African, of the Uganda Airlines, makes us a strategic partner in this conversation. Okay. So therefore, I can tell you that expanded public works, infrastructure works, the road networks, the youth are getting involved. So we have a clear plan for the youth in all intents and purposes.
All right, Jacqueline, speaking of governance, one of the arms of government is the legislature. And we want to look at the 11th Parliament as it's done and dusted with its works. We wait for yet another Parliament, but the 11th one has exposed Parliament's weaknesses in governance. Do you believe Uganda's current legislative environment has encouraged independent debate, or has the political patronage actually continued to weaken the ability of Parliament to challenge the executive meaningfully?
Well, that's an interesting one, but we are going to have a new Parliament coming in on the starting tomorrow. We have a new Parliament, and I would urge you, the Parliament, the office bearers and those who are in charge of inaugurating the parliamentarians to buy a copy of Professor Kasozi's book about Abu Mayanja, the MP. It is a very, very good book which really describes what a parliamentarian should be. Our 11th Parliament was actually, they did an assessment of themselves and they really agreed that they have been a weak Parliament. However, we also acknowledge the circumstances through which they operate. I think they have to look at their political survival, which is very, very key, and their roles of legislating, representing, oversight, and he's been talking about very nice government policies and integrating the youth into the economy, into trade, and we have all these policies and the continental, regional and continental frameworks, like the African Continental Free Trade Area. But then when you go back to what is happening actually on the ground, you're looking at, you're talking about trade and integration of the youth into the African Continental Free Trade Area. But what are the rules? How do we integrate the youth? What do you have to follow? Do you have any youth into the productive sectors of the economy that are there manufacturing? Because for you to sell goods within the African Continental Free Trade Area, they have to be goods manufactured here. But then you realize that actually we are mostly importers of already finished goods, mostly from China and other countries. Yes, but then are you producing, because you're talking about trade and integrating the youth into the economy, into African trade, but what are they producing? We're talking about agriculture, of course we are producing. Do the youth have access to land? Have you given them agricultural loans to be able to produce at a large scale, a scale that they can even be able to export beyond Uganda? Because of course they can do some bit of informal trade, basic trade, but are we able to have our youth producing for exportation, not only here within the East African community, but African continent-wide, because we have a very big market. So, talking about legislature, the parliamentarians should be able to lobby government to put serious monies that can be able to transform the economies and the livelihoods of the youth. So those are some of the things that we see, but then we realize that most of these parliamentarians have been probably focused on their political survival and are really more aligned to what their parties want than representing their populations. After all, they know that when they go back to the populace, down at the grassroots, they'll still be re-elected.
All right, Monday Call, as an independent observer, what do you have to say of the strength or what has been considered by some a weakness, the political patronage weakening the ability of the relationship between the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative?
Well, thank you very much. We must agree that the multi-party dispensation has in one way or the other has actually compromised the quality of our MPs. Because when you look at the quality of MPs we had during the movement system, individual merit, that somebody would come out as a call, somebody comes out as an alloga to speak their mind for purposes of national building. But now today, because of this collective responsibility, caucuses, you have to come up with one. So you find that so many people really suffocated in terms of coming out to speak out on particular issues, giving out their own independent stand. So ideally, I think really that is an area our multi-party system, our multi-party democracy should improve, so that neither is to what extent can MPs be given some kind of free space so that we can also to speak on particular issues. This is something really we need to see. Also, the other issue, yes, as you are also still saying that, as you said, today we realize that politicians are more on survival than actually pushing for the national agenda. Because we have more of people sitting on the fence. They really want to see where the wind blows, and then they will jump on that. Unlike in the 6th, the 8th parliament, really you'd see people, even before they can tell where the wind is going to blow, they are busy giving their mind to the nation. So this is something really that is actually lacking. Then the other issue is the quality of our leaders now. Yeah, because now you remember in the early days of NRM, when you hear people like the late Ria Kategaya coming to address you, the Manyamushegas, you'd really see that they've taken their time to research on something they're going to present. Yeah, but today we have we have, especially the young people who have really jumped onto the system, that somebody will address people with little research, little information. It's all about propaganda. It's all about politicking, which is actually not right. Yeah, because as a leader, a leader, you have to be one that is going to set the agenda. You have a group that believes in you. Therefore, whatever you do, you must always be accountable in whatever you're doing and whatever you are saying.
To what disadvantage is this growing vice for the next 5 years?
No, of course, the growing vice that we tend to have transactional leaders now. It actually, the vice gives birth to transactional leaders. That people will want to cut deals behind the scenes, another lobbying, whereas instead of coming out to speak openly. Because we've seen situations where something is passed when they've not really given it enough debate, enough discussion. They've not really carried out enough assessment to see whether it's accepted or not. But now if you have a transactional, if you have most of the people in leadership being transactional, it means therefore they will always bargain for, please give us this, that you can have this. Whereas ideally in the early days, and that's why actually proceedings of parliament are supposed to be live, so that people can see how their legislators are actually working, are representing their issues. But also with the electorate on the other hand, we are to blame. That when you look at the concluded elections, articulate MPs were thrown out, and you're replacing somebody with somebody whom you've never had speak in public, just because there is a wave, just because you feel so and so belongs to your party. So even as the voters, we've also in one way or the other absconded our civic responsibility of electing leaders that really represent us.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. This is where I want to bring in Major Paula Awich. To your defense, yes, the reality of the matter is that we all see this growing vice. The question being, how then, as a party, are you strategically trying to deal with this issue and not allow it to become a growing vice, but cut it at its roots?
But NRM had warned on this, particularly President Museveni. You remember that many school of thoughts within NRM was saying we need our own home ground democracy, the all-inclusiveness, the movement. Then the World Bank and the IMF and World said we have not seen this kind of democracy. What are you talking about it? So eventually we are forced into a referendum to decide what political system. We went multi-party. But President Museveni warned that you people, you are going for this. Listen to the danger. The danger is, one, if you're a civil servant and you stand, like say you're a PS, you must resign and you don't come back. That alone, some people believe it has contributed to poor quality, because people who are of competence fear losing. So why would I risk? I'm a professor in a government university, I'm a PS, why would I go there to risk? So that already cut a half of the competent people. Two is that you have this institutional framework of talking in caucus. So for us who believed in the movement, I still believe in it up to now. And the beauty is that in the Constitution provides for systems of governance, and the movement is still there. So possibly, after trying all this, we may have to go back to the movement. So this is done. But your question is, as a party, what do we have to do? We try our best. What do? We first encourage quality picking through a primary election. Remember, some political jurisdiction, they pick, they appoint. So we thought that by going through a vigorous primary, we would get the best. And our primary is almost as strong as a final. That is one. Two, internally, we encourage debate in movement caucus. If you watch coffee debate, and even this sovereignty bill, at caucus, people really talk. Coffee bill, the way it came, I followed it because a movement caucus is an institution of the constitution of the party. Just like a youth wing or women league or what. The movement caucus is under the party constitution. So as a director, I attend. So the coffee bill that came, if you follow the debate inside caucus, it was hot. So these are part of the avenues that we think we would try to do to mitigate. Of course, the other one is a criminal process. You remember the MPs who were prosecuted. All of them were NRM because of transactional, as he's saying. So we have many avenues that we try to do it.
Okay. Jacqueline, you have a few cents on this. How do we get this vice right at the roots?
Well, I'll definitely say that we need a more independent legislature or parliament. I think we have now what you call...
When we say this word independent,
yes, a parliament that can stand on its own without, but we have what we call institutional capture. And everyone knows that, where someone is going to come out and say that, yeah, this is the line that the NRM must take, and because you're the majority, because of the transactional politics we are talking about, even when NRM MPs do not believe in a certain position that the party has taken, like when it comes to the sovereignty bill, I know many people didn't agree with it, like the coffee amendment bill, but because they have to add here and toe a particular line because it's a party line, it might not be their individual standing, but because they really have something, like he said, someone is waiting at the gate, they are looking at the wave, how do I benefit as an individual? And because of that, they are going to begin making decisions that are not necessarily the best for the entire country. But if the parliament is independent, then we can really have, so
parliament is, huh?
No, you cannot. It is not independent, and the institutional capture is there. But then we need to have certain reforms in the constitution itself, and have the different arms of government independent of the other. That's the best thing. Yes.
All right, Kakura, you do have your 2 cents on this matter, and we put it to bed.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, these scholars theorize the whole thing. When you say Parliament is not independent, the very most recent bill of sovereignty, it was able to be rectified for the mere fact that there was robust debate and engagement at a party level, including taking in consideration public opinions. You cannot say that that's not democracy. Consultative approach. You saw how they were editing and rectifying these on the floor of Parliament with the Attorney General and the Minister David Moores, including the chairperson of the Legal Committee. I think we engaged quite a lot on most of the webinars, and indeed public views were brought. And that's the kind of robust debate that informs public. If you look at the sovereignty bill in its entirety, from the original one to the current one that was passed, hell no, that shows you that there is independence. Parliament was able to censure in this NRM government in the 40 years. Do you remember the Parliament that censured the first time of the Jim Mwezis? Do you remember the 11th Parliament?
Yes, the 11th Parliament.
But we saw members of Parliament being aligned to Luzira. In the most recent, in corruption scandals, we've been seeing institutions working. The young general in Imbuya has been aligning military officials.
Speaking of the corruption scandals,
Yes.
the 11th Parliament has also faced its own litany of allegations as far as corruption scandals. And the case that you're referring to of the MPs, because one MP did not say sorry, they ended up behind bars, versus the others that were all caught up in that ring of corruption. Corruption being a rhetoric for the 11th Parliament, and some of those members continuing into the 12th Parliament. There's been a very serious question of reflection of why, as a government, especially the NRM government, you are not arresting corruption as should be arrested.
You see, the law is very clear. You must prove beyond reasonable doubt. He who alleges must prove. If you allege that so and so is corrupt, that's why we have institutions like the IGG, we have the Anti-Corruption Court, we have the... Really, there are so many structural reforms we have put in place for the last 40 years that curb corruption.
If the structural reforms are in existence and have not been able to deliver on, then what is the strongest stance?
The problem is the society. You see, there cannot be a corruptor without the corruptee. You would agree with me, those in social sciences.
Yeah, but if you punish the one who's aiding the corruption, then the corruptee will have no one to corrupt.
You see, do you know where this starts from? The other day I was watching a video of a guy transporting matoke from Mbarara on a truck, and these guys were pulling out some stuff out of a full bunch. By the time it gets to Kampala, the bunch is halfway. So now who do we blame? It's a society problem. So we really need to sensitize the public. As a revolution, I would say we need to go back and sensitize, mass mobilization and sensitization of patriotic lessons we need to learn as a people. Okay. So patriotism is the solution to the corruption in Uganda.
Monday, I know that you can give us perspectives with lessons from other, governments that have been able to hand-handedly deal with corruption.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. For every vice to successfully fight it, you have to kill the demand. When you kill the demand, the supply dies. So what are the factors that actually demand for corruption? These are the things that we really need to look at. Because let's look at our political process. It has been monetized. Somebody spends 1 billion going in campaigning. You like it or not, when he goes to parliament, the mind is on how to return the money they
with
use.
Interest.
With interest. That is number one. Now, number two, the other issue that we also have to look at is, why do you think that in Uganda, parliamentary elections are a do or die? You find somebody is in local government, say, no, I'm going for parliamentary. Why? It's because of the envelope. They pay check. Now, in countries like Kenya and Nigeria, you find that the race for governorship, because even a minister resigned to go and contest as a governor. You get it? Because their devolution empowers the governor. Actually, you are even bigger than a minister. You get it? So the resource envelope also determines that. Now, the other thing that also really brings in corruption is the lifestyle of our leaders. The lifestyle of what? Of our leaders. Because you remember, there are some that have been in papers that have bought cars that thrill everybody. Even mentioning them becomes a problem.
Yeah, so, some whispers are saying someone bought themselves a 3 billion.
So now, these are issues. Now, in the early days of NRM, like actually, he's part of the team that brought the regime. MPs were given stouts, not so. Because they would give you a stout that you should, even when you go to the village, you should go to the farm, teach people. But now look at the cars the MPs are really having, the ministers and so on. So the lifestyle also actually is one of the things that lead to corruption. Okay. Then finally is the lack of social securities. That when our MPs lose an election, or any of the MP loses an election, they don't fit back in society. They are used to a particular lifestyle, and now sustaining it becomes hard. So that is why when they have chance, they should steal and invest for the unknown in the event they lose an election. So these are some of the things. So it's also the other hand part. So let's look at, as Uganda, let us discuss social securities, not only for the leaders, but for everyone. So that even when you are out of your employment, you'll get your medical services, your children will go to school.
So this is where I want to bring in Awich. As Awich, I'll come to you, Jacqueline. I want to bring in Awich because he's in a place to say, been there, seen that, done that, and he has a better perspective amongst us on the table. Paula, so much reference is being made to the variations in the crop of leadership that this country has had just within the 40 years, that we had leaders that Akol has referred to who were mandated to actually be for the people versus the crop that we're seeing today that only return to their people to seek for a vote after 5 years. Where did we get it wrong and how do we rectify it?
Thank you. But just a word on this corruption debate that is going on. I think, and it goes to your point and saying, why are we not fighting corruption, or why are other people arrested and others not? So I think here, the biggest claim against us has been that you lack the political will. Well, for once, recently in Chankwanzi, the resolution for the new people going to be in offices resolved that it must be fought. So there is the will. But the other way around is also that, you see, with material interest, and Karl Marx is very clear on this, it has no race, no color, nothing. Did you know that when Iraq was destroyed, the American army went to Iraq and banks were not working? The paymaster ran away with money, American money. They stole it. Because they were paying cash, they stole American money, they pay master, like our Biakotaga. Therefore, to this effect, the commitment, the enforceability of fighting corruption by government is to use actual technology. Because once you get body to body, it is there. For example, passport, fill online, pay online, go and get passport. So you minimize meeting an officer. Courts of law, I am an advocate, file your case online. Let's see if it is filed this one, whose will be put first, and yet the record of filing is showing you file yours first than me. Even this supermarket we see, even the Bazungu would have stolen those things in supermarket. That's why the Bazungu instituted those machines. So once you have the political will that we vote in Chankwanzi we have, then the enforceability must be seen in its rootest. In its deep root, how do you enforce it? If you put human beings, it will continue, whether white or black. Now, your question is on the change of leadership, right? From what we had.
Quality.
The quality of change. The quality of change, I don't think I would say it in a word or two. It's multifaceted, so many things. In 86 to some period of time, there wasn't a lot of privatization, okay? Now we came into a period where IMF World Bank said government should divest itself from education, from medical, from what, from everything, pull out your hands. That alone brought a spirit of individual nature. And therefore many leaders tended to think like that. You see, once you individualize economic aspect, you do not expect a social infrastructure. Because a social infrastructure is what all of us think is wrong. But once you have individual economic merit, then we can't own a social infrastructure. In many societies, including Russia, when the state intervention was still there, even prostitutes were not on the street, because prostitution is a moral concept of what we think is right. But once you bring in economic aspect where it is me and God, then what you think is right is not what I think. So this aspect came, it is speeded up, corruption speeded up at that heave of the divester and the economy. So the challenges continued with also the political format in multipartism. It also came in. However, all is not lost. And I think I will stop at that. Okay. Maybe at some stage I will tell you, we as a party, how have we confronted this challenge? But I just give the background that you are not going to hone a moral aptitude vis-a-vis individual
Give
interest.
us that party position now.
Huh?
Give us that party position now in a minute.
The party position one is to generate the consensus, and that we did in Chankwan's. The resolution that the political will that had been alleged to be lacking, we pick it. Two, enforce prohibitive measures that prohibit, including sanctions, including use of procedures, technology that can reduce steps or activities that promote corruption. Because you are not going to do it by word of preaching, not even in the Bible. The corrupt will go to church and even sit in front, even when the reverend was saying it. So we need practical steps that actually prohibit it. And that's part of the wider strategy of institutions, but also the enforceability that I said.
Okay. All right. Jacqueline, your voice?
Yes, I believe because corruption cuts across all sectors of society and all sectors of government. But I think if government really put forward good social services like education, roads, public transport, health, somehow we can be able to tackle corruption. But now, because of individualism and because of privatization, every parent would want their child in a good school. And how do you afford a very good school? Good schools these days, even you find a nursery school which is 3 million and more expensive than what a university student pays. And me as a parent, how am I going to afford that if my salary is 1.8 million and then I have access probably to state resources? I'll be forced to go and steal state resources to be able to take my child to school, because every parent wants their child to go to what? To school. And the UPE schools that we have, or the government UPE schools, USCE, the different seed schools, really the quality is a bit lacking. So if government put across good social services like the education facilities, roads, public transport. Right now, a litre of fuel is almost 6,000 shillings. If I don't have a government fuel card, and how are people going to afford? Yes, so government should put across public transport systems. We have buses, public buses. We have trains that people can be able to move across without being forced to do what? To steal. Otherwise, if government does not address the concept of social services for the general masses, then corruption would be hard to deal with.
Seeing as the finger of Jacqueline keeps poking you, Kakuru, let me also poke you relatedly to bring in, this is what I want to bring, because we also now have to project and just have a sneak peek into the next 5 years. What does that look like? There's a 10-fold strategic program program right now that's being run by government, having been facilitated with 17 trillion in the financial year that it's rounding up 2025-2026. It's focusing on agro-industrialization, value addition, manufacturing, services, digital economy, tourism, oil, gas, and minerals, to mention but a few. How is that going to propel us as a country economically in the next 5 years, so that we won't sit here in 2032 to look at the problems such as unemployment, and...
Thank you, Priscilla. First, I will respond to I react to my...
No, you react after. I don't have time.
Okay,
if you
now,
react to her, you eat
now,
your time.
Where the tenfold? How do we position ourselves? I look at Ugandans, first of all, we're expanding in terms of agriculture production. The government is going to increase on PDM money so that there is more people into the economy, into the money economy, and create production. There is more money towards like cheap loans through UDB and other government agencies to make sure that Ugandans get involved in setting up of small-scale industries to enable them process their products. There is more money that has been allocated to agriculture-related manufacturing sectors, like the coffee park in Ntungamo. There's been money for the Atiak sugar factory. There is money that has gone to the sugar producers in Busoga so that more people get involved in farming. When you go to agriculture in the Western, you'll see that more dairy corporations are being given money to process milk and pasteurize milk that we can be able to export to the demand where we have milk need in Algeria and Nigeria, markets that are open. In terms of digitalization, we are trying to purposefully fit the youth into the skilling to make sure that they prepare themselves for the oil and gas sector that is coming, other than getting so many Chinese to involve themselves as artisans in the oil rigs. So we need more Ugandans in the oil rigs to sort out the unemployment issues. So otherwise, the oil will disappear in our eyes like the way it did with some places. So how do we purposefully keep the youth and prepare them to this? In terms of tourism, there is a growing need of tourism. I think Uganda Wildlife Authority has been doing private partnerships to call on people to develop game parks, game lodges. There is a lot of economic and commercial diplomacy, marketing Uganda in every state visit of the president. That we did summits, so we are going to increase more of these summits. We are trying to engage more of Africa. I see like the Africa Forward that is in Kenya, Uganda getting involved into new markets in the East African region, and all that is where we should be looking at, and we're going to get to the $500 billion tenfold economy 2040.
In closing, as I want to take your closing remarks to this conversation. Tomorrow is a new dawn for us as a country. Does Uganda look like a country prepared for the renewal, or a country postponing difficult political and economic questions? Let me start with you, Akol.
Yeah, well, we can't say that it is a country looking like postponing problems, because every after 5 years, there is a new mandate given to whoever goes through at presidential level, at parliamentary level. So we realize that we have a number of new people that have been elected, and people elected them with a lot of hope. So we think that really they will bring their acts together in as far as addressing the questions of the day. But in addressing the questions of the day, they really very much need to look at the youth. The issue of unemployment is really a serious issue, and this can actually be tackled very, very, very well if we can address issues of cooperative education. Yes, we can sensitize people on the need to cooperate for good, and also the stability of our country also matters. All right,
because I have another colleague joining me to help us really hear the voice of the people on ground, I'm going to ask Jackie that position be the same position you share in closing remarks, and also representing the NRM. Let me give Major Paul Awich his closing remarks, and what's the renewed spirit that the country should back on for the next 5 years?
Well, about the renewed spirit, for us, we are ready for it, because we already have a manifesto that we gave the people, and the people voted on that. To us, that is a social contract between the people and the party will form a government. So we have, and that manifesto speaks. We picked it from the Vision 2040. So we are on track, and we are building on the stability that we have had, so that we don't say we came from nowhere and you know there's interruption. Okay. So we have a long vision, and we are happy about it, that the people gave us the mandate. Okay. So what they gave us is contained in the manifesto, and we shall execute it. All right, thank you so much, Jacqueline Nakaiza. Thank you so much for being on this table, and Philip Kakuru, Senior Presidential Advisor. Please also thank you so much for your 2 cents on the table. And this table is being closed by Ivan Wadinyolo, who is in Entebbe, to let us know how, as you know, the town that hosts